Sunday. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of True Story Live. We're happy to be here after missing last week, and we'll tell you a little bit about how our trip went in just a minute. But tonight's topic is, when is it time to leave? Colors. And I'm excited to get into that. This one was written by me mainly. A couple suggestions from Glenn, which I always appreciate. A lot of these topics are a little bit collaborative, just a little bit. And I passed along to him, and he fixed some grammar errors and things like that. I noticed, though, that in the title, he didn't try to change the spelling of the word colors. They spell it differently over there. So that was a small victory for me. We will also say hello to everyone in the chat in just a moment. But first, for those of you that are listening for the first time, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Jason Cripps, and I am the main curator or host for the show. But along with me, I have two of the most wonderful people that help me put these broadcasts together. And we'll start tonight with my fantastic wife, Jen. Jen, if you could say hello to everyone. Jen? Glenn, can you...
Yeah, I'll take over. Hi, everyone. I'm not Jen, but...
No, not Jen.
Yeah.
She got
she
bumped.
is.
There she is.
No, she's
I was waiting
back.
for you to let me back in.
Jen. Sorry,
That's okay.
I forgot that you got knocked out. It still showed you in there, but it was grayed out.
Hello,
So, Jen.
people.
Yeah, there you go.
Hello, Sunday.
That's right.
Lovely. It's a lovely Sunday.
It is a lovely Sunday.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you. We're all glad to be here. And again, apologies for missing last Sunday, but it was a necessary thing. And Jen, would you want to share with people why we went to Virginia? We don't have to.
So back in 1984, my family down in Louisiana had an exchange student from Germany named Christian. And he stayed with us a year, and he was 15 or 16 at the time. He was going to high school. But he became like family. And my oldest brother, Dave, who was 9 at the time, bunch of years later, I think when he was like 17 or 18, he went to Germany for like a month, I think, and hung out with Christian. And and I think he came back in like 1987 for a visit with his dad, which I don't have a lot of recollection from.
Right.
But so I hadn't seen him since 1987. So that was just wonderful for him to come visit his daughter. He lives in Vienna now, and his daughter goes to a boarding school in New York. And he went to pick her up in New York, and they drove down and stayed for the week. And so we just went up for the weekend to see him. So that was just lovely. It was a wonderful visit, and he had all these pictures and stories, and it was just great because when you're 4, you don't remember a whole lot.
Yeah, right, sure.
So I heard stories of me crying my eyes out when he left a year later. I was so sad. So he's like a brother.
Yeah.
And he and his daughter Pierre, just wonderful, wonderful people. So they left today to drive her back to school up in New York.
Yeah. Well, we'll pray for a safe journey.
Yes.
Precious cargo there for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, yeah, and from my perspective, I had a wonderful time too. So I was saying to Jen, we collect music and put them on a playlist for our road trips, and I don't know, there's probably 350 songs on there. I don't know exactly how many, but there's a bunch over the past 2 or 3 years. Like when we're watching a show or a movie or something, and the song comes on, we use the Shazam app, and which is really cool because you just press the button and it listens to the song, and then it will pull up the title and my gosh.
Oh my, that was attractive.
It came out while I was talking. That's never happened. That's weird.
That's rude. I'll tell you. The burp.
Excuse me, guys.
See, we're all family here. That's good.
My apologies.
At least it was a little cute.
Yeah,
It was a little juicy. A little juicy. We had ribs for dinner. It did not stick to your ribs. It came up.
No. Oh my gosh. This is a rare form tonight, aren't you, Jen?
Yeah. But
I like it.
Anyway,
Anyway, so
anyway.
I was talking about the playlist, and so going to Virginia is like between 5 and 5.5 hours. And I commented to Jen when we came back. I said, "We've got that whole playlist, and we didn't listen to it one time.
We're too
We
busy
just
talking.
talk. Yeah, we just talk." And I just think that's a wonderful thing. I told her when we first started hanging out that the best way to find out whether someone is good for you or not is to take a long road trip with them. And if you can handle it, then you can cross that off the list of reasons why not to be with someone. So yeah, she checked the boxes on that. We took a trip to Michigan, and where else do we go? Oh, back and forth a couple times to Virginia.
And
But
Hilton Head.
Hilton Head, yeah, that's the other one. I couldn't think of it. But the longest one in Michigan is like 12 hours. So that was earlier on in our relationship, and it was wonderful. I loved it, and enjoy traveling with her and getting to know each other at that time even better. And now it's just like it's amazing. So
Yeah.
there you go. All right. Well, enough about that. We will, Jen, if you don't mind, we have quite a few in the chat. If you want to
Yeah.
just say hello to everyone real quick, and then we'll get started.
Definitely. So we've got Nathan. Nathan was first in the chat, man.
He was.
Good to see you, bud. Torben, Jamie popped in. Let's see. Glenn, of course. Celine's here. Nez.
Mm-hmm.
Nez Leva. Salted Cedar. And am I missing anybody? Did I say Celine? I think I did. Yeah.
You did. Great.
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for being here. And as people pop in later, we will, all, as usual, try to always say hello to everyone. We love that you guys are here. And as usual, there are a few questions in the write up. So if you would like to give your perspective, pop it in there for us. And while I'm going over everything, when I see it, I'll try to pop it in there on the screen. That is the one. Well, there's several things I like about StreamYard, and they're not paying me for for an advertisement for them. But those of you who have listened to us for a while, you know that we struggled back and forth. We used to use Google Hangouts, and there was no problem there. We would sometimes have problems with it spinning and people not being able to hear us and things like that.
And that echo.
And the echo, yeah. But pretty much overall, it worked pretty well. And then they changed it to Google Meet, right? No, yeah, Google Meet. And when they changed it to that, at first it was free for a while. So they wanted to get you in there, get you used to using it. And then they started giving you like an hour and 15 or something like that. And usually the broadcasts are a little over 2 hours. So you would have to come out of that chat and open up another one, or pay $15 a month per person. You can't just have one person own it and then invite guests. Each of the guests, in order to be on the broadcast, would have to pay the $15. So finally, because of our friend Peanut over there from Peanut House, he uses StreamYard. So I talked to him a little bit, and he has a different plan than I do. But even with the free plan, it has worked out very well. So we do it in StreamYard, and it puts it right on YouTube. And there you go. For all of you that were interested in hearing about our platform that we're using. But the other thing is I can pop these things in the chat. It's just pressing a button and they come up. Well, I was there for a second. There we go. There's Salted Cedar with her comment. And then I don't know what this means, but there's our buddy Nathan. So there you go. I like that feature. All right. So we said our hellos to everyone and we introduced ourselves. So now we're going to get started. Again, tonight's topic is, when is it time to leave? Colors. In music, movies, books, stories passed down from older generations, there is always leaving. When is it time for us to leave? When we were brought up by our parents, hopefully for most people, there's a time to leave. When we move out on our own, move forward, leave the nest. In work situations, perhaps a person has stayed in the same job for decades, and either they decide to leave or the powers make that decision for them. Time to leave. In love relationships, marriages, partnerships, friendships, sometimes it is time to leave. Again, maybe you are the one that decides to leave, or perhaps it is the other person that gives you the papers to go. We all face this in our lives, and it brings up the question we asked tonight. When is it time to leave? Inspiration for tonight's broadcast comes from one of my favorite songs by Amos Lee featuring Norah Jones with Colors, and the link is in the description. The lyrics from the chorus go like this. 'Cause when we're gone, when you're gone, all the colors fade. When you're gone, no New Year's Day parade. You're gone, colors seem to fade. It really is a beautiful song. That's one of the songs that's on a couple different playlists that we have. So give that a listen when you get a chance. I'll just say briefly, in putting the show together, I typed in songs about leaving, and there are literally, I don't know, maybe 20 or 25 different playlists that people have put together with all different types of songs talking about leaving. So obviously it is a topic, as I said at the top of the write-up. It's something we all face. So we've talked quite a bit about relationships on this channel. On and on we go about being healthy, coming to the table, better communication, owning what is ours, and letting others own what is theirs or not. In all this chatter, the answering of questions, the discourse, the back and forth, our goal is not to answer these questions on your behalf, but to give our personal answers to each question with the hope that you will answer the questions from your own perspective. So under the topic of when is it time to leave, we come to that first and very important question. Indeed, when is it time to leave? What steps must be taken to even get to that question, if any? What things must be considered about leaving? Does the other person, entity, family member, whatever it might be, get a say? I've talked a lot about people who have walked away or decided to leave me. The biggest and most discussed example for me must be my ex-wife. It might be considered how much I have talked about it, that there is still some pain there. Does the wound still fester, full of infection and hurt? I can, without hesitation, answer no, not at all. However, at the time, her leaving was very painful. Did I have a say? Ultimately, no. What I did have was a choice of how to react. I chose the higher road. When a person leaves, you always have that choice to make. And the same is true as to how you leave. The details of that are up to you, but you get to set the parameters around that yourself. When we leave, what are the rules? Do we need to stick to our guns, or is there any going back? Do we consult others in our decision making? Do we ask the person or thing we are leaving? Glenn suggested we do talk a lot about the obvious topics of leaving, such as relationships or marriage, even friendships, which recalls a few things we might have to decide to leave, which includes drugs, alcohol, gambling, porn, basically any addictive behavior that we give our time and attention to. These things are all included within the idea of leaving. It cannot be overstated that it is hard to leave some things, some people, some relationships. If we cannot leave, or if it's very difficult to leave, does that mean we are weak? Is there something wrong with us if we cannot leave? What does that say about us? Does it sometimes take time to leave? The quick and easy answer is yes. To me, depending on how long we have been involved with, hold on one second. I'm sorry, I have something in my throat. And a very loud drinking of the water. Okay. The quick and easy answer is yes. To me, depending on how long we have been involved with something or someone, we feel we need to leave. the harder it can be to leave. For example, family members are among the hardest people to leave. Despite the toxicity or the unhealthy behavior exhibited, it can be very difficult for us to walk away from family. Not only is there the family bond, but also other family members that do not fully understand your reasons to leave. Should that matter? Ultimately, no. No matter what anyone else thinks, we must decide what is best for us. We cannot let the opinions of others to allow us to prevent us from leaving a situation that is not good for us. Another contribution from Glenn, one I agree with, is important to point out here, is the fact that sometimes leaving can be unsafe because there can be implied physical or emotional ramifications. If one feels unsafe, then you don't just leave. You should consider seeking assistance or counsel. If you are leaving because you feel unsafe or the relationship or object is affecting your health or your quality of life, it is also important to be safe in leaving. We can consult others, concepts of worldly wisdom, whether philosophical, spiritual, or secular in nature. It all comes down to the decision, do we stay or go? We leave that decision to you for you to ponder and consider. All right. There we go. Pretty simplistic compared to Glenn's write-ups, but there it is. I've thought about this topic a lot, and I'll just say that without going into details, I'll just say that we've had this topic come up for us recently. And we had a situation with someone that we knew, and that we had to make a decision to walk away from that person. And for me, it was less the person themselves than it was the behavior. But I'm sure it doesn't always feel like that to the person. I'm sure that they have a hard time separating behavior and trying to make it personal about them. I was talking to Jen and Glenn about this a week or two ago, and I was explaining that it's difficult for me to do that without closure, because the question always is, do I talk to this person about it? Do I have a discussion with them and explain to them the reasons, or is there any mediation? Do we talk about possibly making it work? Are there things we can do to change? And I think with some people we can do that. It depends on the level of health of the person that we're talking about here. I think with some people we can sit down and talk to them and have a conversation. There are other people, though, that it does no good to do that. And of course, again, it's your decision you have to make in each situation. Is this the person that I can try to talk to first? And Glenn pointed out earlier that in this particular situation, it was difficult for me to move on without having closure with the person. And he intelligently stated that this person couldn't hear me. There was no point in coming to the table with the person because they're not listening. They're not hearing what's being said. And I agreed with that. That was a huge thing for me. And even though I had already made a decision, it helped me to look at the decision I made and see that it was the right one. It was hard for me to not have closure, though. But it's something that you have to learn how to do, and I'm still in that place of learning. So
Yeah.
hopefully it won't happen too many other times. I just don't like it. I don't like walking away from a relationship. Because I'm a person that loves reconciliation, as you've heard me say. I love stories where, there might be a conflict of some sort, and then the two people come together, and then, at the end, they work things out and they're able to be in a relationship. I just am a sucker for that kind of story. But we live in the real world. It's not a fairy tale world. A lot of times there can't be reconciliation for some people. And then if you're a healthy person, you have to figure out how to deal with that on your own. And that can be a difficult thing as well.
Cripps, can I add one thing here, please?
Please.
I think it's made more difficult if you individually are coming with the potential apology hat on, that you really are prepared to listen, and if the other person can come up with some good points, you are more than willing to apologise. But without that opportunity, I think that also causes a problem when you don't get the closure.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, can you think you could explain that a little bit more?
Sure. Well, I think it really depends on the individual. But if you're a person who has a inclination towards reconciliation
Right.
rather than estrangement,
Right.
you are going to be willing and more than happy to put your hand up and say, yes, look, I can see what you're saying is valid, and
Sure.
I'm going to offer my apology
Yeah.
for causing that. I didn't realise, or whatever's appropriate at the
Right.
time. But
Right.
if you don't get that opportunity when you're willing to offer it, I think that's not such an easy thing to swallow.
Oh, I get it. So the other person is not even giving you the opportunity to put your hand up.
And say I apologise,
Yeah.
or at least to attempt
Right.
to have some clarification even
Right.
of a situation. That's it's not so easy without a degree of practice. I think to just say, okay, well, I've got to basically I've got to cut my losses here, and I have to leave, or I have to walk for
Right.
my sanity really, or my emotional stability.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's
Yeah.
not so easy.
No, it's not easy. I think like anything else, if you have a chance to practice some of these things, it can get easier. But I don't want leaving someone to be easy, but I also don't want, for myself, I don't want to continue in a relationship with someone that's abusive or toxic. And I'm just kind of at the point in my life now where I don't really have any room for anything but that. And I can blame people like Glenn and Jen for that, because relating to them is so effortless. I'm not saying for everyone that when you first get into a relationship, it just falls together, well, and you don't have to work very hard at all to have a relationship with everyone. But that's my experience, especially with Jen. And we mention it all the time. It's just like, and you guys have heard me say in talking about relationships, I always heard growing up, even my own grandparents said, marriage is work. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes perseverance, definitely takes patience. And so in going into relationships, even at a young age, I expected that to be the case. I was ready for that. Even in my first marriage, when I realized that she wanted to date other guys, my first compulsion was to just, get quickly away from that relationship as soon as I could. But after I had some time to think about it, there still was a part of me, because of that reconciliation, and also from a believer perspective, that once you're married, the idea that you stay with that person, that unless they cheat on you, but that was the case. So there was an out there for me. But even with all that considered, I'm the type of person that would have been willing to at least talk about reconciliation. But fortunately for me, she was not willing to do that. My ex, I'm referring to. Um, she said she was, and then she changed her mind. She consulted other people and came back and said that nobody thinks it's a good idea. But what I heard was, you don't think it's a good idea, because what difference does it make what everyone else says? I mean, good to check with people, as I said in the write up. I think, the Bible states, in the multitude of counsel, there's wisdom. I think that's true, but ultimately, you're the one that has to make this decision, I believe. So, regardless of what anyone says, it comes down to you deciding what it is. Yeah. All right. Some extra commentary there. Okay, so the first question, let me come to the main part here. All right. We'll start with this one. When is it time to leave? Just kind of a generic, multifaceted, could go a lot of different places. When is it time to leave? Jen, do you want to answer that one?
Well, Jamie in the comments reminded me of a really important one. Is it healthy?
Oh, is the
Um,
relationship healthy?
is it healthy? My dad had this saying with us growing up as kids, you are who you hang with.
Wow.
And I think that's very true. I think it's hard to be in a relationship with people and parts of them not rub off on you, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's a lot. But if the situation is not healthy, and you kind of have to be introspective to observe that and make a decision,
Yeah.
weigh it. Um, and also be introspective in the sense of like, how do I feel when I'm around this person? Do I have anxiety or am I walking on eggshells? Am I
Yeah.
able to be myself? Am I being accepted? All of these questions. And
Right.
I think coming down to it, is it healthy or not for me or for you?
Hmm.
Um, that would be a really good indicator. I think there's a lot, but I think that's one of the most important ones
Yeah.
to ask yourself.
Oh, good point. Good point.
Is
And
it healthy?
is it healthy? I like it. I like it. Um, I guess it's kind of the same thing, but is it abusive?
Mm, yeah.
Um, it's kind of in the same category, I suppose, but just looking at it from a different angle. So, if you're asking, is it healthy? That's a wider thing, I think, because some things could be sort of healthy and not all the way healthy. I think with certain people, there may be things that are really on that spectrum of being healthy, and there may be some things that aren't as healthy. So maybe it's a little bit different. Is it abusive? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, abuse is not healthy, so it fits
No.
into that category nicely. But is it just outright abusive? Um, I wouldn't expect anyone to stay in any kind of relationship, whether it's just emotionally abusive, spiritually, financially, in any way. And that's where I depart from the quote unquote conventional wisdom that comes from organized religion in general, which they take the stance that God hates divorce. So if you're in a marriage like that, uh, in a quote unquote Christian marriage, then the only reason you can leave is death, or if they cheat on you. Those are the two reasons given. And I've heard situations, even when there's cheating, where churches will try to talk the person into staying. In fact, there is an article that came out recently about a very popular church, a mega church, that I'm sure everyone has heard of the pastor of that. Uh, I can't ever think of his name, though. Do you remember the name of the pastor, Jen? I'm putting you on the spot here.
John MacArthur?
That's it. So, John MacArthur, a very well known pastor, very popular guy. And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is something, and we're not going to stay on this topic. As Glenn had mentioned, we talk a lot about the church breakups and relationships. We're going to try to not focus on those as much, but this is worth discussing just briefly. So there was a family in the church, and I guess the husband was kind of involved in some of the offices in the church, things like that. So he was a well-known person, but there was abuse, and there was even accusations of some incestual things going on. And she decided that she was going to leave him, and Mr. MacArthur, in front of the entire congregation, decided to guilt and shame the wife for leaving her abusive husband in front of everyone.
Yeah.
This is the only reason I'm bringing this up, because this is an example of some of the churches out there and their attitude toward divorce, where they do not take in consideration the other mitigating factors of what's in the relationship. What are they getting away from? How are they being treated? Is it abusive? Is there sexual abuse? Is there physical or emotional abuse? I think those factors weigh in. I can't speak for God, but when you look at the verse, God hates divorce, you have the whole of Scripture to look at and see what else God hates. Does He hate adultery? Does God support physically or emotionally abusing your partner? I would say no, that He doesn't. So I'm just saying there are a lot of other things to consider, and it's just an example of the society that we live in that doesn't have a real good context of this idea of when a person should leave or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
What about you, Glenn? When is it time to leave from your perspective?
Well, I think before I even get to that point, I was thinking, well, what are the indicators that you should take notice of before you even came to that possibility? And I thought, well, number one is if something feels wrong, you've got to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
And don't go into denial or ignore it.
Yeah.
And probably number two is you have to be honest with yourself. You can't. If the more you shove it under the carpet, the more potential there is for a lot more for upping the ante and making it a lot worse. So I think that I can't speak when is it time to leave, because that is just a so nebulous sort of idea. Each person has to make that call for themselves. But I think there's some basic fundamentals that people need to go through in order to come to what I would call maybe an informed choice.
Right.
And
Yeah.
as I said, I think that's that the integrity that you deal with the real situation with yourself is absolutely vital. There's just going under the carpet and trying to put your hands over your head and say it's not happening. Well, that's got to be the absolute worst way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
Oof. I've been there many times.
Well, I agree with you. It is sort of nebulous. I knew that we could, kind of talk around that a little bit. So I understand you can't deciding that for other people, but what about for yourself? I mean, maybe you've never been in a situation where you needed to leave before, but I'm sure you can think about what it would take for you to,
Okay, that's a fair question. Yeah, I've left at times. Usually, usually where I feel my values are being compromised if I stayed.
Ah,
well, there you go.
That's a really
In other
good
words,
point.
if someone did something, if I saw someone I was even say friends with, and they went and hit the cat over the head with a lump of wood, well, I'm not going to accept that. I mean, I'm just a basic example. I have to leave because this is out of order.
Yeah.
I don't endorse violence. So, you can see there's a lot of things. There could be someone who treats other people in a disdainful manner, who looks down to other people, who's very judgmental. I'm out of here. I'm not going to. I'm out of there. I'm leaving.
Right.
I don't need that stuff.
No.
So it's all values-based decisions, I would think, or pretty much from my case.
Perfect. Thank you for filling that out for us a little bit, Glenn.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Most valuable.
Yeah, very valuable. We want to say hello to Believe. He's in the chat, and we're glad that you're here. And he says, you would think this would be easy in the Christian community, but it continues to amaze me how there are folks who don't even care to think about an amends. He continues, heck, I would take an FU, but some won't even give you that because they're so far gone in their self-righteous pride. And when they put that pride wall up, all is left is to walk away and keep distant. Why emotionally abuse yourself over it? Thank you. Appreciate that, Believe. And then Nez follows up with, when there is abuse and toxicity, it is time to leave. Well, all right. Well, that's pretty straightforward. All right. Okay, yeah. So that was the first question, and Glenn is absolutely correct. It is sort of nebulous, but I believe that each one of us at least did a good job of picking some things out of that nebulous question and giving some answers there. So the next step is, or the next step, the next question: what steps must be taken to even get to that question, if any? And Glenn kind of answered it that way. He was like,
Yeah.
"Well, you have to think about other things first, and possibly I should have arranged the questions differently." But how does a person get to the point to even ask the question, when is it time to leave? What do you think, Jen? What steps should a person take before they get to that point of deciding they need to leave?
Gosh, Glenn really hit it on the head. I think,
Yeah,
the values is a big one. And again, being introspective. I think if you're not introspective and you're not looking at that gut feeling, if like he was saying, if something feels off, if you're not aware of yourself and just more focused on the other person or other people, it's really hard to get to the next step of making those decisions. Um, so being self-aware to an extent, I think is really important. I just never asked these kind of questions of myself when I was younger.
yeah,
How does this relationship make me feel? Do our values line up? Am I walking on eggshells? Are there things about this person or this friendship or relationship that I'm like ignoring or shoving under
hmm,
the rug or glossing over or even hiding from other people? That's a big one.
yeah,
Like for example, my last marriage, I didn't talk to a lot of people about what was really going on.
yeah,
I wanted people to like him,
right,
especially my family. So that's a big indicator as well.
yeah,
Are you hiding things from people? Eh.
right, yeah,
Not good.
yeah. How secretive is the
Not
person that
good.
you're with?
Yeah, and I never stopped to ask myself why. I never spend enough time, like I said, being self-aware of, why am I doing this? Or even recognizing that I was doing it.
Yeah,
Like I would for a split second, but I would never dwell on it. That's a very hard place to be when you just kind of you're trained almost to just like it being a fly that you swat away real quick.
right.
Go away.
Go away. Yeah,
You gotta really look at it and be like, oh, okay.
yeah.
It's a big ass fly, excuse my language.
I
So,
like it. I like it. Thank you, Jen.
yeah.
Jamie says, yes, Jason, the church is terrible about trying to keep people in abusive relationships to avoid the unpardonable sin of divorce. And then when the one partner abuses another, they have already broken the covenant of marriage. Thank you, Jamie. That's kind of my point. I would agree 100% with that. And then I didn't say hello to our buddy Lon, Fisherman in a Box. He's in the chat, and welcome to you. Thank you for stopping by our little show. If you haven't had a chance to listen to Fisherman in a Box, please, please, please check him out and go listen to his broadcast, especially for believers. I mean, it's for everyone, but for believers, that's the kind of content that you'll find over there. And he's really funny too. I really get a kick out of his brand of humor. Funny and intelligent, and loves the Lord. So definitely, please give that a listen when you get a chance. But he says, the Bible, seek wise counsel. Dead Freddie Mercury says, don't fool with fools, just walk away and keep good company. Both work. I love that he put both of those in there. One from the Bible and one from the world, Freddie Mercury. That's good stuff. Okay, so I think that Glenn and Jen's answer was good enough. What steps must be taken? I would just add that I think in a lot of cases there needs to be a lot of thought put into whether you leave or not. We're not saying, I'm not saying, if you're in a marriage, the first thing you do is decide to walk away. But I don't think there's very many people that just do that. like you just get married and your dinner's not on the table by a certain time, or he doesn't like your meatloaf and you're like, oh, I'm out of here. That's it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Um, I think that most people, it's not over one thing, it's over time, and it's several things that add up. And we've talked enough on this broadcast about communication. And I believe in communication. I believe if you're talking, you're not stuffing your feelings. You're mentioning the little things that would normally build up and become big things if they're not discussed. If you're doing that the entire time, it doesn't ever get to that point where you
Yeah.
have to decide to leave. You're
Yeah. And
dealing
that,
with it.
yeah. Good.
You're dealing with issues as they come. That's all.
Yeah. I was just going to say in friendships as well, it's just disaster waiting to happen with friendships if you're not talking and sharing and, even with the little stuff, it builds up as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as the steps are concerned, I'm a big analyzer. I like to analyze things and look at it from every angle. I'm just kind of naturally like that. But again, I think if there's abuse, that takes care of a lot of other steps for me. If that's going on, maybe it doesn't take as much time, but I think still, I still think people, it takes a lot to leave. I mean, even in an abusive situation, I mean, things have changed a lot, but back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, there was such a stigma around leaving a marriage and divorce, even at that time. So people would stay. They would stay in an abusive situation because societal standards and like we've discussed, the way the church looks at things. So there weren't as many steps back then. I think people are a little bit more enlightened in this area now. As we've mentioned, even in the minds of the police, I think they're starting to get that it doesn't need to be just someone beaten to a pulp by their spouse or their boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever. That there's much more that constitutes abuse. So I think they're wising up a little bit. And
Chris,
then
I think this. Sorry, I didn't
no,
mean
go
to
ahead.
butt in.
No,
I thought you finished. That was all. I think this is a difficult one because we're not gifted with genetically with what a healthy relationship looks like. If Dad beats Mum up after he's drunk and gives that role model, what does the child do when they grow up? Do they don't necessarily know that it's unhealthy, or even if they think it might be, it's sort of if it's ingrained in them, they're still going to accept abuse in their own situation. So
right,
this is tough as. I mean,
Yeah.
I think personally, I think people need and abuse is shocking. I mean, I've never been in that situation, but in general terms of things that are not abusive, I think you've almost got to stuff something right up in
right,
order to get the experience you need to take to get to the understanding of what is acceptable and what isn't. But I
sure,
don't think it's so easy for a lot of people to do that.
right, right. I would agree that it's not so easy for other people, and some of the reasons for that are it does take something big. I mentioned societal standards, uh, standards of your church, standards of your neighbors. What are your neighbors going to think if you leave this situation? Your parents. I mean, parents can be well-meaning, but they can make comments that make you think that you should stay.
Yeah.
I mean, Jen knows a little bit about that, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it just can be very, very difficult, and sometimes other people make it even harder. But again, I'm going to keep coming back to this. It comes down to what you need to do for you, and I don't believe that's selfish.
Yeah.
It's self care, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I would say too, one thing to look at is if you're in a situation and you are overly worried about what other people are going to think and not really worried at all about what you think or what's happening to you or what your opinion is, that's an indicator of something being off as well. I had been there, caring more about other people's opinions about my
Right.
choices and opinions and than I
Yeah.
was about myself. Like, what did I think?
Yeah.
Then you're kind of living your life, gosh, for all of these people around you that have opinions, but they're not in your shoes. They're not living your life. It's not their life, it's yours.
Right. Yeah. That's it. It is your life. Yeah. Thank you, Jen. Uh, so the old fisherman is on a small sabbatical. The tube of few shut him down for a week. Now back to your regularly scheduled program. Well, that's unfortunate, but probably means you said something good and they didn't like. So, well, there you go. Uh, what was it? 21 days? Aren't you like halfway through your sentence at this point? It shouldn't be too much longer. Okay, so the other question I'm not going to ask because we kind of already covered it. It was a little redundant. But the lead up was what things must be considered about leaving. And we're going to talk more about, Glenn added a comment that we're going to discuss kind of toward the end. But I think what I meant was, are there certain logistical things in place? But Glenn kind of made a really good point about safety and things like that. So I'll save this question for that point. So we'll move on to the next one, which is: does the other person, entity, family member, whatever it might be, do they get a say? Do they get a say, Jen? What do you think?
Meaning, like, if you're in a relationship with them and you're planning to walk away, do they get a say?
Yeah, does the person let's just say, I mean, I hate to keep coming back to this, but in a marriage situation or in a relationship like that, or a friendship, it could be any one of those things. Does the other person get a say or do they not?
You
In
know, I
whether
think
you leave or not?
I think it depends. I
Yeah,
think if it's dangerous or harmful, no. Now if it's just like smaller bumps, I think there's depending on the situation, I think there's value in trying to come to the table with someone and trying to work
sure.
through it. Because I've had a handful of friendships where I have hit pretty big bumps and we've come to the table and talked about it and worked through it, and it's made the relationship stronger. And
Yeah,
one thing I'm amazed about is when you work through stuff with friends or family or in a relationship, it's sort of it's almost like it paves this road for further communication. They build on top of each other. Every time you can come
oh,
together in safety and share and hear each other out and work
yes.
through it, it
Yeah,
sort of builds on top of each other to where it makes it easier each time, each consecutive time that a bump comes or something goes wrong. It makes it easy. It's all, I mean, I'm sure you guys could all agree, any friendship or relationship, that first fight or
yeah,
the first bump, it's always the hardest. You're like, how do I do this? But once you can work it out, and I think it's great depending on the situation, if you can give someone the opportunity to, because sometimes people don't know when they do stuff,
right.
or they may be different in their makeup as a person, and something that they said they found funny, but it was hurtful to you.
Oh,
Um,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And I've had times where friends or family are like, oh my gosh, like I had no idea. Now that you brought it to my attention, I could see how that would be hurtful. And I'm so sorry. And then the air is cleared and you move forward with more
yeah,
information.
yeah,
But sometimes the situation, if it's dangerous, if it's abusive, and it's been repetitive, and there's been
yes,
other times that you've tried to come to the table and it's just one-sided, or the person's not listening, or they don't hear
yeah,
you, or they've come to their own conclusions about you that you know for a fact aren't true.
hmm.
It's just where can you go with that? You know?
Wow, good question. Great stuff, Jen. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to Glenn next. But before I do, Jamie put a comment in there towards Glenn. She says, yes, Glenn, that is even more all encompassing. Any place where someone's values do not match your own. So Jamie agrees kind of with what Glenn said about when it's time to leave. And he said that comment earlier, but that was just posted in there. not too long ago, so I wanted to address that. Probably I'm a little behind in the chat, just to let you guys know. But
After you guys are done answering this question, I wanted to read one of Nathan's in the chat.
Okay, perfect. So don't forget where it is,
Nope.
please. Okay.
I got it.
All right, Glenn. Would you like to follow up with what Jamie commented on your other comment and then answer the question, please? Does the other person or family member or entity, do they get a say about your leaving or not?
Okay. No, I think we covered the values thing. I'm happy to address the question. Okay. Well, leaving, to my mind, it is quite a decision to make. So, okay, in terms of comments from other people, here's how it works for me. If I trust someone and invite them to comment, yeah, that's great. They give me their opinion. They say what they want. I don't necessarily have to agree or disagree. To the other people who want to add stuff uninvited, they can go jump in the lake. It's none of their business. If they can, if I don't, if I wanted their opinion, I would have asked them. If I didn't, piss off. Take your opinion and take it with you.
I love it.
It's straightforward.
I love it. Take a long walk off a short pier.
That's it.
Yeah.
The plank, even.
I love it. Well, I mean, that might be uncomfortable for some people, but you know exactly what you expect out of others, and I think you're pretty graceful in general about other people. I mean, you give them, room. You give people a lot of room, but if it gets to that point, I mean, you have to have a line somewhere, and your line is, if you didn't ask them to comment, then keep it to yourself. I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, I think.
Yeah.
If I wanted to ask them, I would have, but I obviously didn't think that they were the person who asked in this situation. If it was something else, I may well have, but some of this is pretty personal stuff. So I think you choose carefully and hopefully wisely who you seek opinion from.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, when it's personal, you're not in a position, or most people, certainly not me, I'm not going to run out there and advertise it on YouTube or something like that, am I?
No, you're not. No.
I'm going to keep it private as much as I can and deal with it behind the door and not in the public domain, which a lot of people seem to want to do.
Yeah, they make it public.
Yeah.
And I wonder if people do that because they're in a place where they prize, I don't know if that's the right word, but other people's opinions over their own.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
They do prize other people's opinions over their own. I mean, really, what it comes down to is if they could trust their own opinion, they wouldn't need to consult with anyone else.
That's true.
I mean, you can relate to that. I mean, you're at the place now. You're at the place now where you can rely on your own opinion. You don't do polls anymore. You don't ask a bunch of people what they think before you make a decision.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times that I had an opinion and then went and talked to family or people and they disagreed or had a different opinion. And I would literally change my opinion to match theirs because I didn't trust myself. I honestly, because of many things that have been said and done throughout my life from when I was little, I thought I was stupid. I didn't think I knew any better. And I would meet anybody. I'm telling you, I'm not exaggerating. And it was like, if someone else's opinion different than mine, they were right and I was wrong.
Yeah.
Like that was how my brain was wired.
Right.
And that's sad.
Yeah.
Well,
it was sad. It was sad.
Yeah.
And now it's
not sad anymore.
Right.
It's
Right.
different.
Because we have been programmed. We have been programmed either by society, from religious institutions, from our parents, from friends. But the good news is that if you're programmed, that means you can be reprogrammed.
Mm-hmm. So true.
So any patterns that you follow, if you are able to see them and you want to make a change, you can make that change. Maybe it's hard. Maybe it takes some time. Maybe you need someone else's help, but you can do it. I'm proof positive of that. I haven't always been the paragon of virtue and integrity that I am now. Uh, just kidding. Well, no, I'm not. I'm definitely
Are you
not.
sure?
Right. I'm quite sure. Thank you.
Do you mind if I read Nathan's
Please do.
question?
Please do.
Okay, so he said, or he asks, what do you do when it's a reoccurring theme where all your friends, even Christians, are your friends while you're doing the work, not them? I've tried picking better friends, but it's the same. So I guess
Cool.
he's meaning you do all the work in the friendship.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing the calling and the texting and the
Yeah.
posting on Facebook or reaching out, to keep the friendship going. I've been in friendships like this. It's exhausting and
I have too. And I believe it or not, I have an answer for you, Nathan. Okay, first of all, I'm going to say that it depends on what you want to do as a person. In other words, if that's not a problem for you and you want to be the pursuer and you're okay with that, then by all means, that's a decision you make. Now, from my perspective, because I have done this too, Jen just said that she has done that. She's chased other people. I've actually told this story before, but I have, and he's still a friend of mine. But back in the day, I really wanted a closer friendship with him, and I chased him around like a puppy, like a little puppy. What are we gonna do, Spike? Where are we gonna go? What are we gonna do? Like that. And it made me feel like crap. It did, because when something didn't work out, or he said, no, I don't want to do that, I allowed that to really get to me, and it was hurtful.
yeah.
Now, later in life, I learned that if you pay enough attention and you wait long enough, people will tell you exactly who they are. They will tell you. It may not be in words, but it could be in action. What he was telling me was he was not interested in a relationship with me. He was not interested in a friendship. Now, we did become better friends later, and I didn't have to chase him around. It's really when I stopped chasing him that we became friends. And it wasn't a game I was playing. I just got tired of it. So I kind of let my hands off, and later just we moved towards a friendship. But I know about him now that he's not good at that. He's not good at calling and checking in and stuff like that. So Nathan, some people just aren't good at it. So you have to decide which it is. Is it that they're just not good at it? And then that puts you in a position, if you want a relationship with someone, that you have to be the one to reach out? Or is it that they're not really interested in a relationship? And that shouldn't be hurtful to you. It could just mean that they're not a good person for you. I would say, Nathan, that there are plenty of people that want a relationship with you. And I would save my time and effort for someone that fits that category. Someone that at least gives as much as you give to them. That's what I would say. What would you say, Jen? Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was wonderfully said. I would say, from a believer standpoint, just pray and keep looking. I feel like I just put in the comments, but I feel like in this world today, there just seems to be less and less people that are interested in true friendships, it
Right.
seems. It just seems that way. And more people are looking for followers than friendships.
Ooh,
So if
write
you think
that
about
down.
it, with the followers, it's people following you.
Yeah.
It's all about you, and
Yeah.
you're putting out content per se, even in real life, and
Right.
you want people to follow you around, have a little paparazzi.
Right. Well, yeah,
But
it's that pride thing.
yeah, it's not
Yeah.
good.
I mean, how prideful is a person as I've got, 3,000 followers, and that's probably low. I'm probably shooting way up. I don't have anywhere near. I don't even know. I mean, I have an Instagram. I mean, that's one of the things that they call them, followers instead of friends. I have some people that I've connected to through there, and they become quote unquote followers. There might be 13 or 15 or something like that. But I've heard people talk about, oh, I've got 500,000 followers. Some of these Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Do they use followers over there at TikTok as well? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do with TikTok.
I don't either.
Anyway, Jen, the point you're making is a really, really good one. And I just want to add, and I'm going to ask Glenn what he thinks about Nathan's question here in just a second. But I think with social media, we've gotten away from thinking that friendships are what's needed or what's important. As you said, Jen, it's more about followers and how many friends you have. I've got 500 friends, and I might talk to maybe 50 of them, not even regularly. I've got friends in there because we have a similar interest, but I don't talk to them every day or every month even. Now, some of those people I've been friends with my whole life, and so there's not a need to talk every day. What will happen is they'll reach out and check with me and say, "Hey, we haven't talked in a while," or I might do that. And it's okay because we were friends outside of Facebook, so there doesn't need to be a daily check-in. But I have been better at that than I am now, reaching out to people. And I'll just be really honest about this. Jen fulfills a lot of things in my life, and so I'm not in the same place where in the past, without Jen around, I was way more interested in male friendships and going out and things like that. But the other thing is I've matured, so just my interests have changed. Doesn't mean I don't like the people anymore. Doesn't mean I don't ever want to check in with them. It's just things change, and that may be the case for a lot of people. I mean, but Jen, your point was excellent. People are wanting followers rather than friendships. I think that's good. I hope you wrote it down. Before we move on, Glenn, do you have a comment about? I still have Nathan's question up on the screen. If you have anything you want to say about that, I just want to give you some.
Yeah, I do. I think I'm looking at this in two ways. One, the first way is in a current situation where you do all the work, they don't reciprocate.
Right.
I think that's a pretty simplistic. What's the word? I'm trying to think of the word.
Solution.
Conclusion to reach is that they don't rate you.
Right.
They just you're not important enough for them to reciprocate. So what does that tell you?
Yeah.
I think you've got all the information you know about making a decision.
Right.
Now, the other thing is a constructive relationship between two people who don't communicate regularly, like they might talk for 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. But when they get together again, it's still the same balance as there was when it was initiated. So you don't really feel like you've been apart, like you have unevenly contributed, and that relationship just seamlessly continues even if you don't talk for a year or more. So but when you're doing all the work, you just can't be apart for a year with someone like that and come back and you'd be thinking, oh, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. These people are going to be gone long, disappeared, moved on, found somebody else to grovel at their feet. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not doing it.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate that. Well, there's your answer, Nathan. So hopefully that was helpful, and you can put in the chat if you have any more questions. I love that you guys comments in there. And before we move on to the next question, our buddy Lon just posted in here. Who can find an excellent wife? She's more precious than jewels. That's from the Bible, of course. Friends come and go. Yeah, and I am blessed to have found a very excellent wife, and I know she gets embarrassed pretty easy. Sometimes I do too much gushing. I've tried to scale that back a little bit, but I have to say that because Lon posted that in there.
Thanks, Lon.
Yeah. Yeah, just another reminder of what an excellent wife I have. I'm very grateful. Okay, that's it. Gushing over as far as that goes. Okay, back to the write-up. The next question is, when we leave, what are the rules? Are there any rules about leaving, Jen? What do you think?
I think it's good to do it with integrity. Like when I left and I went back into the store, I chose not to say anything bad about my ex to our customers,
You
because a
did.
lot of them were asking questions, and um, I just kept it very short and sweet. Not sweet, in that sense, but just
Yeah.
short and sweet, the phrase.
Yes.
I think there were times where I wanted to just lay it all out there because, rawr. Um, but I didn't. I did not. I
You
chose
did
not to.
not. No.
I do think there are times I really do hate ghosting. I hate just falling off the map with no explanation. I think there are times that it calls for it. And sometimes even that can be uh integrity, you
Yeah.
know. I think sometimes that can be a safety for yourself,
Right.
depending on the situation with the other person. And I think it's good to, depending on the situation, I keep saying that, it's good to try to come to the table with someone, if you think there's some benefit that could happen, or maybe it could be salvaged.
Right.
But sometimes it's just best to disappear.
Yeah.
Um, so that's my answer.
I
Rules
like it.
wise.
It is wise. I like it. Yeah, I like Jen's answer. I think that you are the one that sets the rules, and if you decide that the relationship that you're in, I mean, I can't make decisions for other people, but let's say that the person's been in a marriage for 25 years, and it's not abuse, it's something else. Maybe it's just that you quote unquote fell out of love. I think in that situation, maybe there does need to be some rules or some conversations or coming to the table or whatever. But maybe they're just done with that. But real quick, a memory popped into my head when Jen was talking, and first I want to say that there were times that she was not wanting to lay it all out on the table, and I was going to say that there were times I wanted her to. I wanted her to tell people. I wanted people to know what her ex had done to her and the horrible person that he was, because I mean he lived in that area, and I'm not saying it was the right thing for me to think, but I have to be honest and say that that's what I wanted to happen, and I've been just really impressed with Jen, that she made her own rules for how she was going to leave, and it was indeed with integrity, and she didn't have to do that. She could have made life miserable for him, miserable, because she had the goods on him. I mean, she knew, and I won't say any of what the things were, but she had some things on him that would have been very embarrassing if they were made public knowledge, and she didn't use any of that. So that made me think of when I was going through my own separation / divorce. I was actually staying with some friends, and my friend's dad, my friend said, "Hey, Dad, come here for a second." He came in there, and he was telling his dad the story of what was going on. And somehow he found out that all the bills and stuff were in my name, because this other person, my ex, didn't have any credit. And so when we turned things on, I did the electric and the cable and the phone. We shared my phone bill and stuff like that. And the dad said, cut her off. Turn off the phone, turn off the electric, turn off uh, the cable. Just shut it off. She'll come home from work one day and all that stuff will be off. She won't have any power. She won't be able to use her phone, and she won't have any cable. That'll show her. And I immediately responded, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that. And it made me feel good for a second in my flesh that someone made that suggestion. But I wanted to leave with integrity, regardless of because what she was doing was not in integrity at all. It was selfish and mean spirited, in my opinion. But that was her decision to do that. I was going to leave with integrity, and I did. And it's not something I have to look back on and think, oh, I wish I would have handled this better. I didn't want to do anything like that, even though I could have. And to me, that's the true test of power, to have the power to destroy someone and you decide not to. That's power. So in leaving, there are going to be other people that encourage you to do this sort of thing, scorched earth, and make them pay for what they did and all that. Sometimes you just want to get out, and I think that's the case for Jen. She just wanted to get out, and she did the things that she needed to do. So she set the rules. She set the rules for herself and how she was going to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quickly and quietly.
Quickly and quietly, and that's what happened. All right. Glenn, what about you? When we leave, what are the rules, if any?
I think this is another values-based decision. I think I like both your answers to the word integrity. I would add dignity, because I think you try to muster as much dignity as you possibly can so that you can hold your head up, because one day down the track, you're going to look back and you're going to say, geez, I'm proud of myself for the way I handled that. Or
Right.
you might think I was a total asshole. I know which one I'd prefer to be thinking.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I'm just a little bit add on to what you said, but I do agree with how important it is to act with integrity.
Okay, cool.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. I wanted to say hello to Annette, who's been in here for a little while, and I think I neglected to say hello to her. So hello, Annette. We're glad that you're here. Hope everything is going well with you. She didn't ask me to do this, but everyone, if you would, continue to pray for Annette. She's got some tough situations going on with family, and that's all the detail I'll give. God doesn't need to know the detail. He already knows. So just if you could take some time tonight and just shoot a little prayer up for Annette, going through some tough stuff. So thank you for that. Okay. Do we need to stick to our guns, or is there any going back? So in other words, when we leave, do we need to stay gone, or is it possible to leave wiggle room for us to be able to come back? And this may seem like a ridiculous question, but there's a reason I'm asking this, because I have seen many situations where someone goes back and leaves again and goes back. So how do you guys feel about that? What about you, Jen? Do we need to stick to our guns, or is there any going back for you?
I think I keep saying this, I feel like a broken record, but it depends on the situation. For lesser infractions, I think it's good to leave the door open, because people hopefully grow, change and learn, evolve,
Right.
in their own health, their own search for getting healthy and growing as a person. But some doors need to be closed and stay locked.
Right. Right.
And I think that all comes back down to, as well, the being self-aware and what is healthy for you.
Mhm.
I've heard many stories of people, like, say, get out of an abusive situation with a friend or family or
Right.
ex, and they think, oh, I've learned all this stuff and I'm healed and I'm stronger. It amazes me how one can grow and become healthy, but within a certain friendship or relationship, they slide right back into that old dynamic,
Uh-huh.
that old pattern.
Yeah.
It's just such a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Now I've heard other stories where they have grown and they have boundaries, for an
Right.
example, and the door has been left open and they try again, with
Yeah.
a friendship or whatever, and the other person does not like the fact that that person has grown. They're not the same person anymore.
Right.
They have boundaries,
Right.
the courage to say no, or to share their own opinion and stick to it, instead of, you know, uh
Walk
changing their
away.
mind, be like, "Oh, you're right,"
Flip
and
flopping.
that people don't like it, and then they leave, because they want to
Yeah.
surround themselves with people that want to play in that game of their dynamic, the unhealthy
Right.
dynamic. So,
Right.
I do think it depends. You just have to be careful.
Yeah.
Um, Gosh, and be observant. People in the chat were talking earlier about being observant of people. I think that's very important. I know for me, I've struggled in the past with being hyper vigilant, and it didn't last too long. It was pretty insane right
Yeah.
after I left.
Right.
it was like, oh my gosh, not that I'm exaggerating here, but I'm like, everybody's a narcissist, get away from me. I'm like,
Yeah.
run away. Ah.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not real life. That was just my overly active fear, because I had just gotten out of like an entangled situation that was very
Right.
abusive.
Yeah.
And I did have some narcissists come around after. I felt like I had a target on my back. I was like, oh my gosh. You just have to be careful and be observant of people. And, I do believe that people, even really manipulative people that are really good at lying, there are tells, and I think a lot of times people will show you and tell you who they are, and you just have to listen instead of doing the whole sweeping under the rug thing.
Right.
You just have to be observant. And Nez, I think it was, and earlier in the chat, she said something about looking at the fruit. There's a lot you can tell about a person from their fruit, biblically speaking, and
Yeah.
that's important to be aware of as well.
Yeah, I would agree.
What are the company these people keep? Who are the company that these people keep? What do they talk about? How do they talk about other people? How do they talk about their exes, their family, their mom, their dad? All of those things. It's just you're gathering information,
Yeah.
not to take them down or anything, but just for your own protection.
Yep.
So
Well, that's a really good point to add. When you're listening to them talk about other people, I mean, you had a similar situation with your ex where he said these horrible things about your family. And it's easy to say, well, he's not saying that about me, but you think that he was. He didn't
yeah,
want to come out and blame you directly. So by talking about your
or
family,
insult me directly.
right, or insult you directly. So by insulting your family, again, he was telling you who he is. He was
Yeah,
saying, I am this type of person. And if he's talking about other people, if he has anger and hatred towards other groups of people, but he's not showing it towards you, he's showing you a part of himself. I mean, you should believe him. You should
yeah,
believe him.
yeah.
Okay, so on this topic, from my perspective, and you guys have heard me say this before, but my mom and dad, they got a divorce, and then they were apart for like I think 8 or 9 years. It seems like, I don't remember exactly how long it was, but it was a good chunk of time that they were apart, and then they decided to get remarried. And I never thought it was a good decision. Of course, you just have to support people, whether you agree with it or not. In that situation, at least as the son, so I was supportive, but I secretly, well, not too secretly, I told some people that I didn't think it was a good idea. But I was supportive, and just like Jen was saying, you observe the person and see if they make any change. And my dad didn't change anything. So my mom just assumed that he had grown and changed in the period of time that they were separated. And I do have some theories about why she decided to remarry him. But he had changed nothing. And it took her another 7, 8 years, I think it was, that they were together before she finally got to the end of the road and decided, you know what, this isn't working for me. And she left again. Um, and we have seen, Jen and I have seen in these abusive situations where people will continue to go back to the same relationship they left in the first place. And I'm flummoxed by that. I don't understand. Well, I do understand a little bit. I mean, if you're programmed in a certain situation and you leave, you had the guts to leave at one point, and then some time goes by. And some of them, you don't even leave. The person says, oh my gosh, and they freak out. There's like, oh, I'll change, I'll change. They say they're going to change, and they might change for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, even. Maybe it's a couple of years.
Yeah.
But they didn't really change. They just didn't want you to leave. So they did what was necessary to keep you there in the relationship. They didn't really change. I heard someone say, in a situation where when you're ready to leave and you say you're going to leave and they say, oh, I'll change, go ahead. I heard them say, go ahead and leave and observe that person for a year. If they want to do counseling, go to counseling with them. You don't have to make the divorce final, but you live in a different place and see what they do over the course of a year. if in a year they've shown up for counseling and you've seen some marked change, then you can make a decision as to whether you go back to that person or not. And I think that's pretty good counsel. I mean, I'm sure it applies differently to different situations, but the idea of it, the concept of it seems wise to me. You don't stay in the actual relationship, but if it's a marriage and there's some time under your belt and things like that, if the person is saying they want to change, then you can set up some boundaries and see if they recognize and
Respect them.
respect your bound. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. Thank you, Jen. If they respect your boundaries, and if they do, then you can revisit things. But again, this falls out after having said all that. I still love reconciliation, and I have heard many stories where there was a problem of some sort, and they had a rough spot. They worked through it together, and they reconciled, and it was a success. But to me, in that situation, there needs to be willingness in both parties.
Yes, both sides.
Both sides have to be willing. So it's possible. I'm not saying it never works, because it does. You just have to be careful. You just have to be very, very careful. Okay, Glenn, what about you? Do we stick to our guns, or is there any going back? What do you say?
I say, in context of leaving or having been left, that some doors will shut, but I think others should always remain open. I'll give you an example. If my ex-wife or your mum, etc., ever turned up on our front door today, and said, "We need help," well, Sandra and I would say, "Please come in. How can we help you?"
Yeah.
If we had shut that door, we wouldn't have let them in the front door.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm wondering how your situations are different from mine, because I didn't have an abusive situation. Well, perhaps I did, but the thought was I could never turn someone away.
Yeah.
Who I was close to, like someone I love and someone who's the mother of my children. How could I do that? I couldn't live with myself, and nor would I do. If someone that Sandra was close to in the same position came to the door, I would be exactly the same. I'd say, "Please, how can we help?"
Yeah.
How would you deal with, for each of you, if your ex-partner's turned up on your front door now?
Yeah, we talked about this, so that's a great question. What do you want to answer first, Jen, and then I'll answer from my perspective? Or
My first heart reaction would be, if he showed up at our doorstep and said he needed help, I would want to let him in and say, "What do you need help with? We'll definitely help." My only concern is that he is a liar and he's very manipulative, and I don't know if I could trust that.
Yeah.
So my heart would want to extend help if he needed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I might do it very what's the word?
Cautiously.
Cautiously. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. Well, first I'll respond to yours. So if that were to happen, I wouldn't have any problem necessarily letting this guy in, but I would have to be careful not to throttle him. I think I have a lot of anger toward him, even though I was not in the situation myself. Hearing all the stories and hearing how he treated Jen, this person that I love and cherish and admire and desire, this wonderful, amazing heart that she has, I'm angry. Just by proxy, just in the fact that anybody could treat her the way that he did. I would have a hard time with that. But getting past that, realistically, if he were to knock on the door and say that he needed help, I would hear him out. And I understand why Jen would say that she would have to be cautious, but he hasn't programmed me. I haven't had 14 years with that guy.
Yeah.
So I would be watching for any signs of manipulation or anything. And I'm not saying I'm perfect and I always pick up on it. I'm not saying that, but I do have experience with manipulative people, and where there's no history. I think it's harder for me. I mean, I would admit that it's harder for me with the people that are in my life that are manipulative. But I've gotten even better with them. So I would expect Jen to see some manipulation quicker than I can if it's a person that is my relation, if it's the person that I'm involved with somehow. So I would expect that she would trust me in that way to be able to
Yeah.
see it if it came up. So
Yeah.
there's that.
And I would say if it was just me living by myself and I wasn't with Jason, it would have to be a no.
Right. Right.
I would, knowing that Jason would be here and he's hasn't been through what I've been through with
Right.
him
Right.
personally, um, and has a very discerning mind, I'd
Right.
feel more comfortable with him present.
Sure.
So
That makes sense.
and I would even tell him, if I were by myself, I would say, I want to say yes, but I want you to get help.
Yeah.
Maybe I can call somebody else to help you, but it can't be me,
Right.
you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Good one. On my end, we Jen and I actually talked. So I know where she stands on this. If my ex reached out and said she needed help, I wouldn't have any problem. I mean, depending on what it was. Um, we left on good terms as I've ever seen, and that was mainly because of how I decided to leave. But she didn't make it hard for her to leave, for us to divorce and all that. She wanted out, and I didn't fight her. And I remember when I had moved out initially, but I still had some of my stuff over there, and she was going to leave the apartment that we shared, and I was already gone, but I did have stuff over there. So I remember that she asked me to come get my stuff, and when I went over there, I knew about her because this had happened the first time that I had gone to her house to move her. She had said the whole time that she'd been packing and stuff like that, and I got there with the moving trucks and the movers, and she had not packed a single thing. Um, I knew that she was terrible at packing, and when I got over there, that there was a couple things packed, but she hadn't finished the bulk of it. So what I did, and I've told people this story, and they're saying, "Oh, you're so easy, Jason. Oh my gosh." She manipulated you, and she didn't. She never asked me to help, but I decided that I would help her pack, and I did. I finished with my things and got them packed, and then I spent a good deal of time helping her get her stuff packed. And I did not help her move; she had to arrange that on her own. I draw the line somewhere, but I did that because that's who I am as a person. I wasn't manipulated. I wasn't doing it so that she would come back to me or anything like that. I did that because I wanted to leave on good terms. And this was a person that I initially had said, I love you and I want to be married to you. So that didn't change because she wanted to date other dudes. That didn't change for me. It changed the dynamic of our relationship for sure, but it didn't change who I was. So, in answer to the question, if she reached out to help, there'd be nothing to prevent me from helping her, depending on what it was that she needed. In fact, the last time I spoke to her, her grandmother died, who I loved her grandmother. She was a very nice person, and she was probably in her late 80s at that point. And I think she was in her 90s when she passed. And she texted me and said that she had died. And I called her. This is before Jen was in the picture, of course, but I called her and she cried a little bit, and I comforted her. And this was after my mom died, so I had been through that already. So I could understand what that feels like to lose someone that you're close to. And I validated her and showed empathy, and we got off the phone, and that was the last time I spoke to her. So if her parents died or something serious like that, and she felt like she wanted to reach out to me, it is an open door. I didn't slam the door on her. She made the decision to leave, and I agreed to leave. And I'm glad that I did. And I'm in a new relationship, and nothing's going to change that. And I asked Jen about it, and she says, no, she wouldn't have any problem. She trusts me. She knows that nothing's ever going to happen with my ex ever. And so she would be supportive of if that ever happened, because Glenn asked the question off air. And I think it's a great question. It's something to consider for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did we all answer this last question? Should we stick to? I think we did. Okay. So the next question: do we consult others in our decision making? Jen, do we reach out to other people and ask their opinion?
Sometimes,
Sure.
I do think there's wisdom and counsel.
Mhm.
I think it's important that the people that you speak to have a good head on their shoulders.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that, and even going with it in the mind of, okay, I want to maybe get some perspective on the situation, but knowing that the final decision comes down to you.
Yeah.
Um, like I had a friend who was a customer of ours in the store who was a lawyer, and I remember I I went to her for uh advice on, getting a divorce, and she knew someone that was a divorce lawyer. And because she was a customer and she was still currently a customer and I wasn't in the store, but he was,
Right.
she got the very clipped version as to why I was separating with him. And she told me that I didn't have biblical grounds to leave. And I said, I hear you, but I respectfully disagree.
Yeah.
And I didn't even go into it like, you've only heard the very surface of the
You
situation and I'm
didn't. I
choosing
was.
not to share. I didn't even go there. And it came out of my mouth. Like, I'm not
Yep.
one to say that. And it was right after I left.
Mhm.
So I was very in a vulnerable place. And I was kind of even shocked that I didn't question my decision
Right.
because of what she said. Because the old me I would have been like, oh my gosh, is she right? Like, maybe I don't have biblical grounds to leave. Oh crap.
Yeah.
It would have wrecked me, but it
Right.
didn't. But I had a point. Yeah. So because she was a customer and it was an acquaintance, it didn't hold a lot of water for me. Um, but I do think it can be good. I think there are times where you can make a decision on your own and not have to get perspective from other people.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think it can be beneficial.
Right.
I think it can, and
Yeah.
just choose wisely who you talk to. Like I think Jamie in the chat said earlier about having a couple of close people that you don't have to guard yourself. You can share everything, and even if it's to vent a little bit or to get some
Yeah.
perspective and some ideas or opinions. But
Yep.
really and truly, it really comes down to you.
It does. Great
So
answer. Thank you, Jen. I remember when that happened, before we move on, I remember when that happened, I was so impressed that you answered the way that you did because you had told me that what you were like in the past. I never saw that side of you. But I believed you when you said, that you would have been wrecked, and if someone had said that to you, you might have second guessed your decision and things like that.
yeah.
But you didn't, and I was so impressed with that. And it's clear to me why. I mean, you asked for a green light from God. You got the green light the next day, and you were done. You made the decision. I think you had already left in your mind before that. But once you decided that this was it, nothing he did or what anyone else said was going to sway you. And I
Nope.
was just very impressed with that. And I've seen you stick to your guns with other people that you cut off at the beginning. And as you said, it might have been you being super sensitive or whatever, but I think they were good decisions because they were people that were never your real friend in the first place. And I think you
Yeah.
saw that. I don't think it was oversensitivity. It may have seemed like that. I think it was you understanding that you're in a different place and that you don't have any room for that in your life anymore.
Nope.
And you
Nope.
knew that that was the right decision.
Yeah.
And it hasn't come back to bite you in the butt. Anyone that
Not
you,
yet.
oh, not yet. So I think that was good. Yeah. So do we consult others in our decision making? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, biblically speaking, in the multitude of counsel, there is wisdom. I have reached out to people, not in a poll situation, but I've gotten some good advice from people. And even in my divorce, I got some good advice. The advice that I got wasn't the best, the one I shared, but there were other people that did give me good advice about how to leave with integrity and things. In particular, my godfather, Phil, he was helpful. He married us, actually, my first wife and myself, and he was someone that I consulted with on spiritual matters and things like that. And he presented, I wish I had followed it, but he presented me choices when I went to him with some of the red flags that I saw coming up. And so, of course, I felt comfortable going to him when the divorce was happening, and he gave me some really good advice that I followed, and I'm glad that I did. So Jen said, and I'm paraphrasing what she said, make sure it's the right people. But yeah, there are people that you probably shouldn't ask what their opinion is. But if you've got, like Jamie said, if you've got it, you need a few people in your life that you can really trust. It doesn't hurt to ask them their opinion. Now, having said that, I think ultimately, again, it does depend on what you're going to do. You need to be the one. You're the one that has to live with your decision. No one else does. Not your family. I mean, your kids might, if you have kids and you're leaving your husband or you're leaving your wife, whatever, and the kids are going to be involved in that. Yeah, you have to weigh that in there. You don't necessarily ask your kids what they think is best, depending on how old they are, I suppose. But yeah, I think there is in the multitude of counsel there is wisdom. I believe that. I believe that when we check with people, especially on tough decisions, that it can be helpful. But again, it just comes down to what do you decide? What's important to you? That's my answer there. What do you think, Glenn? Do we consult others in our decision making about leaving?
Okay, specifically with leaving, because it is in many cases it's a pretty monumental decision. Yeah, I'd be inclined to get some other perspective,
Sure.
and people who know me will know that I'll ask your opinion and I'll appreciate it. But it's very clear to me that ultimately decision is my decision, and I have to live by it.
Right.
I that. So yeah, I know specifically in my cases where this topic's been on the table. Yeah, I've sought advice because I think that a view from outside the bubble can be quite different from someone who's living in it, because
Right.
you're just in every minute of every day, and a lot of times you just don't see it.
Yeah.
So the counsel of others, I think, is particularly valuable. Yes, can be valuable for sure.
Sure.
Even if
Okay.
you disagree with it, it can still be
Yeah.
valuable.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
Sure.
There's been times I've brought situations up with Jason, and I've been amazed that he would have a perspective I didn't even think of.
Yeah.
And it may not have been necessarily relational. I mean, sometimes it is, but um I like Glenn said about someone that's outside the bubble, I think another perspective could be very beneficial.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Well, it seems like all three of us are kind of on the same page about that particular question, so that's good. All right. So Glenn suggested we do talk a lot about the obvious topics of leaving, such as relationships or marriage and even friendships, which we've discussed, which recalls a few things we might have to decide to leave, which includes drugs, alcohol, gambling, porn, basically any addictive behavior that we give our time and attention. These things are all included within the idea of leaving. It cannot be overstated that it is hard to leave some things, some people, some relationships. So I just want to say briefly that if it's not a person, it's not a relationship, but it's a thing, like gambling or alcohol or a sex addiction, porn, whatever it might be. Um, it may seem easier because there's no well, I mean, sometimes there can be people that are affected by these choices that you make, for sure. But I think in my opinion, it's much harder to quit something. It might be more difficult for you, but in the grand scheme of things, deciding to quit something that's destructive, that part can be a pretty easy decision. Actually executing it, I know is hard for some people, depending on the substance or the addiction that's included. So I'm not trying to make light of it. But in relation to that, what I just read, if we cannot leave or if it is very difficult to leave, does that mean we're weak? And this is a suggestion from Glenn. Does it make us weak? What do you think, Jen? If it's hard to leave or we can't leave, are we weak?
Great question.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Um, Gosh, that's such a good question. Okay, so if I'm thinking about myself,
Right.
I think, yeah. but there's other things at play.
I like the way you
Uh,
answered that. Yeah.
yeah. Sorry if I'm offending anybody. No,
No.
that's your responsibility if you're offended. Um, not mine. For me,
Uh,
I was very woefully lacking in a lot of knowledge. Like Glenn had mentioned earlier, knowledge of what a healthy relationship looks like,
right.
what abuse is, what manipulation is, what toxicity is, what narcissism. I mean, I just was so lacking. And because I was convinced that I was the problem, I was always the problem in my mind. If something was wrong, if someone was angry, sad, upset, if their body language said to me that they were agitated, my first thought is, what did I do?
Hmm.
And I still have issues with this. There's still some residue there. And I have to catch myself and be like, okay, stop it. But I think, I would never, look at somebody else and call them weak. I'm speaking of myself, okay, guys.
Right.
Um, I because of the place I was in, because of my upbringing and my experiences and my lack of a lot of knowledge with these things I just listed off, I think it did make me weak. And maybe weak's not even the right word, just uninformed and naive.
Sure.
So that was a weakness of mine.
Yeah.
That's my
You're
answer.
you're explaining it well. So
Okay, good.
the word weak, yeah, I mean, maybe could have used a better word, but I think it does expose a certain weakness. So this is from my perspective. It does show a weakness if you can't leave, especially something that's clearly abusive. I mean, to you, to anyone else, whatever. For the sake of argument, if it's something that's destructive and abusive, and your values are not being appreciated, you're being neglected and ignored and abused. If you can't leave that, I think it is an indicator that there's a weakness. There's a substantial weakness in you. Uh, Having said that, it doesn't mean that you can't deal with it. It doesn't. It just when these things come up, it's just an indicator for you.
Yeah.
So knowing that hey, you realize this is hard for me.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
a bad
hard.
thing.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And we all have weaknesses. It's not,
Mhm.
it's weird because even that word, even adhering it to my situation in my past, who I was, I get triggered by that word because my initial react, you think I'm weak? I'm going to show you how strong I am. I'm going to prove to you,
Right. Right.
even to myself. Um, but you know, gosh, some of these situations that people are in, it seems hopeless. And
Yeah.
it's not looked at as a weakness. It's looked at, I don't have the money to leave. I have kids. There's so many different variables that play into it. Now, weakness might be one of those, but I think for some people, maybe it could be the main variable, but for some people, it's one of many.
Right.
So,
I love it. So to finalize my answer, it may be an indicator that there's some weakness, but it doesn't mean you're a bad person, and it just means that if you're seeing that, it's something for you to look at. And also, when you look back at that struggle that you had in the beginning, it's going to change. When you get out of that relationship and you grow and you change and you become more healthy, you're not going to look down on yourself and say, "Oh, I was so weak back then." You're going to know that you have become stronger because it is an indicator, and you can see that, and you can also see when it changes. Just like Jen has said, she still has some residue of certain things, but I wanted to say uh, you're not in the same place, by far, not in the same place as you ever were,
yep.
and you're continuing to grow and continue to get stronger and stronger. So if you were weak back then, which you weren't, yeah, it's not about leaving. You weren't weak in that area for sure. But if a person is, it just may mean it may mean you need more help, And that's where having people that support you and that care about you and love you around you to help with something like that, then that makes it
Yeah.
a little bit easier.
And of course, I think of the scripture when we're weak, he is strong, and that's so true. Um, I think there have been times in my past that I've been weaker, and God has really showed up.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. Thank you for your answer. I'm chuckling a little bit because I didn't say hello to my friend John Dons from California. Welcome, John. I'm glad that you're here. He says, let's take up a collection to buy Glenn a louder chair.
ah, I love
That's
it.
hilarious. It's not Glenn's chair.
Oh, it's
It's
Jason's.
my chair.
We'll start a Patreon. You can be the first to donate, John.
Yeah, I need a new chair, John. I need a new
We
chair.
tried to oil that sucker and it didn't. What the heck, WD-40? You don't work at all.
Well, it wasn't okay. So you have a good memory. It wasn't this one. It was another chair
It
that
was
I
the other
had.
squeaky one.
It was way squeakier than this one.
You think?
Oh yeah. The other one, yeah. Yeah. This one's squeaky, but the other one did a clunking sound too. It wasn't just squeaky. It had
Oh,
other
yeah, I remember the
sounds that it
clunk.
made.
It was very
Um,
talkative. It wanted to be the host. It was
it
jealous.
won. You are on fire tonight with your comments. My gosh. I love it. So anyway, I wanted to share that. It's hilarious. Squeaky chair. Okay.
Did Glenn answer?
No, I'm going to Glenn. Okay, so if we cannot leave or it's very difficult to leave, does that mean we're weak, Glenn? What do you think? I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this one.
Nope, I don't think it's anything to do with weakness or strength. I think it's to do with fear. I think
Ah.
I don't. I think fear's the word here. Why
Mm.
don't we leave? It's because of fear of what's on the other side a lot of times. Or fear, as Jen said, fear I don't have enough money, the circumstances are difficult, the kids are young. I mean, there can be 100 other reasons. But
Right.
ultimately, I think it's not weak. I think it's fear.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah, I think that's a better word than weakness.
Wow.
You know, I do think fear can be seen as a weakness per se, but I think a lot of people in these situations have a right to fear. They're valid fears. Sometimes they're not. You know, like I think I had some fears that might have been invalid, but I had a lot of fears that were valid.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, it got to the point where for me, my fear of staying and what was going to happen if I stayed outweighed the fear of leaving. And I was
Right.
just like, it got to the point where I was like, I don't care if I'm homeless. I don't care if I can't eat. Anything is better than what I'm living in. Like this
Yeah.
is just hell on earth.
Yeah.
Um, and and God really met me on the other side of it.
He sure
He
did.
he put people in my life to support. You know, my family was there to let me stay with him for a little while, and it was bumpy and it was scary, and
Yeah.
but I would not go back and do it differently. I just wouldn't.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen.
Cripps, is fear weakness?
Yeah.
In your
So
opinion?
yeah, I was just going to read that.
It's a good
So
question. It's a good statement to pick up on, I think.
yeah, fear is a weakness, and as Lover said, fear is a weakness. And as if you want to say more about that in the chat, then she follows up. Glenn asked why, and then as follows up, Christians need to remember we are not given a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Yeah, that's true. That's straight out of Scripture. But Jen and I have talked about this many times because I've heard a lot of pastors, Nez, talk about this idea of fear, and they're quick to point out, and not in the same spirit that I think you mean it, but in the way that when Christians are feeling fear, they're guilted and shamed. And they use this scripture to do it. They said, well, we're not given the spirit of fear. So if they're experiencing fear, then obviously the conclusion is there must be something wrong with them. If a Christian is experiencing fear, like there's something wrong with that. So I've studied this idea of fear, and I go back into Scripture, and there are plenty of what I always call heavy hitters in the Bible that experienced fear. Elijah is an example who God gave a victory over the prophets of Baal. And, with the altars and the pouring the water on them, and then fire came down from heaven and burned up all the water. And so huge victory. And then Elijah took a sword and killed hundreds of these false prophets of Baal. And then he goes off by himself in a cave, and he heard that the Jezebel was going to find him and kill him. And he was full of fear. And he hid out in a cave and asked God to just take him. So that's fear. That's a fear I don't think I've ever experienced, where I'm so afraid that I ask God for that reason, ask God to just take me out because I'm so full of fear of this person. That's a tremendous amount of fear. And this is a powerful person in Scripture. Also, David in Psalms was a very valiant person. He was the king of Israel. He shares with God that he has fear. Many people have experienced that. So, and as I'm not being argumentative with you, I hope you understand. I hope you hear the tone of my voice and know that I'm not going against you here and what your comment was. But I am going against the way that other people have presented fear because of their misinterpretation of Scripture. And they make people feel guilty. They use it as a weapon, not as something to help them figure out what to do when they feel fear. See, if someone came to me, because I've experienced fear. So this is why I've looked into this, into Scripture about this idea of fear. I have felt fearful. And there's different kinds of fear. There's a fear that helps prevent us from jumping off a building for fear that we're going to kill ourselves. There's fear of, certain neighborhoods where, it's probably a place that we're unfamiliar with, an unknown neighborhood that we just are afraid of the unknown. What could happen to us? And that helps us, steer clear of those sorts of situations. There's a built-in physical fear that exists in us. The kind of fear that we're talking about, I believe that Scripture refers to, is the fear that comes from the evil one, that he tries to make us feel fearful and helps us to forget about who we are in Christ. That's what I believe the fear is. It's not all types of fear. And what he wants us to do when we feel fear is to bring it to him and let him help us with that fear. Because when we're fearful, he is strong. He doesn't deal with fear. So his Spirit in us will help us to deal with the fear, which is a real thing. So I hope I've explained that well. Fear to me isn't weakness. So I'm probably for the first time ever, I'll disagree with Nez on this one. I understand how it is talked about. Pastors have talked about it over and over and over again, and they're quick to point that out. But I don't think they've gone deep enough into Scripture to see that there are plenty of people that were fearful, and God didn't say to them, "Well, I didn't give you fear, so you're no longer my disciple, or you're no longer my son." No, he understands fear. And just lastly, I'll say Jesus was fearful. If you remember when he was in the garden and he was praying, and he actually asked God to take the cup away from him. He knew how bad it was going to be for him. He knew that it was going to be very, very difficult to be crucified and beaten and betrayed and all the things that he had to go through. And he asked God to take the cup away from him. What do you think motivated that? I think it's clear that it was his human side. It was him being fearful of all the pain that he was about to suffer, the pain and the betrayal that he was going to take upon himself, the sins of the world. There was fear involved with that. So I've gone on and on about this enough, but I obviously I feel strongly about the idea that is presented that fear is some kind of wrong thing. We all experience it from time to time, and at least from my perspective, I think it's something that's built into us, and we just have to learn how to deal with that when that fear comes up. So hopefully that helps. And then Nez did say, "We are weak and he is strong." That's exactly right. So I appreciate your opinion, Nez, and you happen to hit on something that I've looked at a lot, and it's
I
go ahead, Jed.
I was gonna say sometimes fear is a gift, and Glenn put something in the chat that kind of was going along my thought process. He said, "I don't think feeling fear, if confronted by a brown snake, is a weakness. It is a fear of being dead in 20 minutes."
Right,
Sometimes fear is a gift,
right,
you
right,
know.
right,
Fear is an interesting thing. I think if it motivates us, that's
right,
probably a bad deal.
right. And Believe said, "Please know that your fear is not your shame or blame. Your fear is not to your shame or blame." I agree with that. Yeah. So there you go. I think it's a very specific fear that's being described in Scripture, and I think it has to do with what the evil one tries to do to us. It's not the fear that God put in us, like Glenn mentioned. It's a reasonable thing to fear getting bit by a snake that you're dead in 20 minutes. You don't go handling those things, and you, as much as you can, set up things so that you're not having to face that. Okay, did everyone answer that last question?
I think so.
Okay. Does it sometimes take time to leave? Does it sometimes take time to leave, Jen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had both.
Right.
I've had times where I'm like, "Oh, I'm out and I'm gone,"
Yeah.
But I guess what's your definition of time?
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, you could go there. Yeah. I mean, it's different for everybody. Some people 5 minutes is too long, and then other people 5 years is too long. It just all depends on the situation. It depends on what kind of abuse it is, or if there's any abuse, or you've been with someone for a long time, and maybe you just need counseling, and maybe that works everything out.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
Yeah, it depends.
But you say yes, it does take time, or it can take time.
Yeah, it can take time.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree that it can take time. I think that, and we'll get to Glenn's last point here in a minute. I think that'll explain more what I mean by it. It sometimes does take time, and you need to be very, very careful. But yeah, I think in certain situations, especially where there are kids involved, I mean, there are so many things to consider about leaving. I'm not saying, again, if there's abuse there, I mean, get to a safe place. I mean, worry about how you're going to do all the logistics at another time. But that still may take time. I mean, in most states, in order to get a divorce, you have to be legally separated for 6 months to a year, and you have to go through that. They don't just hand you a divorce in most states. They don't just have you sign some paperwork and you're done the next day. So yes, it sometimes takes time, at least legally, to get away from a person. I think in Virginia, if I remember correctly, it was 6 months. So, Jen, had to wait 6 months before the state considered that she was divorced. But she was gone already. I mean, she'd already left. So that's what I'm implying. Sometimes it takes time for certain things, and it may take time, depending on the situation, to get your ducks in a row, so to speak. So in those ways, it might take time. What do you think, Glenn?
Yeah.
Does it sometimes take time to leave?
Yeah, I agree with Jamie. I think each situation is individual,
Right.
but I I think as you get more experience, you get hopefully more astute about picking up the flags that are waving and saying, "Hey, I think you need to be considering whether you're going to stay or leave here." Now, I had in that case that you mentioned before, the person who was uh, the one you mentioned. Anyway, now I had no indication whatsoever. I had no red flags whatsoever that there was a potential issue. So
Right.
I didn't pick it,
Right.
but as soon as I did pick it, I didn't even get the chance to leave because that person was gone anyway. But what I'm saying
Right.
is sometimes there's no markers that you can hang your hat on and say, hey, something's not right here.
Right.
So, and all of a sudden it can just drop on you from a great height and you'd be thinking, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very individualistic, that's for sure.
That's true. Now, I would say in that particular situation, it was actually a favor to you. I'm not saying it was easy, not knowing all the things, but um, for us, we stuck around for a while because the person hadn't left right away, and so there was an opportunity to see plenty red flags. I mean, continually, over and over and over again. It took some time to kind of ferret out what was going on, and then once we were able to see that there was no chance of reconciling because, as you stated today in the text message, the person couldn't hear anyone else. She could only hear herself, only hear her own voice. So in that case, you sometimes have to make a tough decision. And for us, it did take more time. Glenn didn't have the opportunity to see all that stuff, but it may have been easier for him. But in any case, it's different in every situation. And I put up what Jamie said. Sometimes there are steps that need to happen in order to leave successfully. Sometimes we need to know we've done everything we can do before leaving. Each situation is different. And I agree with that. It's a good comment. So I think we're all on the same page about that one. Sometimes we need to know we've done everything. I feel that way too, Jamie. There are other relationships where I have to try everything I can try first. Now, in the case of my divorce, there's a difference between being willing and giving the opportunity to do everything you can do. I could have chased her. I could have demanded, because we had agreed that if we were ever going to have before we got married, I had her agree to certain boundaries that I had set when the red flags started coming up, and she agreed to all the boundaries. And one of the boundaries I put up was that if we encounter problems in our marriage, you have to agree to go to at least 3 counseling sessions with me. And she agreed to it. And I brought this up during the separation period. And at first she said, absolutely not. And then she said, you know what, you're right. I agreed to this. So I'm going to do it. And then she said, I'm going to seek counsel, as I mentioned earlier. So she came back after the weekend, after thinking about it, and said that she sought counsel and no one thought it was a good idea. So she refused. That's my point. So the willingness was there on my part. I made the offer and she didn't take it. So in my mind, I did everything I could do. That was what I was willing to do. That's what I set up before the marriage.
You can't make someone stay.
Right. You can't make someone stay, and you can't make someone follow what they say they're going to do. She obviously wasn't a person of her word. If she was a person of her word, regardless of what anyone said, I mean, I would understand if it was an abusive situation, but there was no abuse on my part. I am not capable of doing it in that way. So she wanted to make it seem like it was something that it wasn't. And it became very clear to me after a short period of time what the real reason was. As I've said before, she said that God told her to separate, and maybe he did. And maybe it was for me. Maybe she gave me a huge gift by leaving. I don't know. All I know is it ended up being a gift for what I have now. And so I'm forever grateful. But her reasons were way more selfish. It wasn't just that God told her. And it doesn't matter at this point. It doesn't matter. It's just that's the way it happened. And we do have to take things into consideration. And it's often very difficult. Okay, we're almost done, guys. So the last part here, and this is another contribution from Glenn, and we'll end on this. This is something I agree with that was important to point out. The fact that sometimes leaving can be unsafe because there can be implied physical or emotional ramifications. If one feels unsafe, then you don't just leave. You should consider seeking assistance or counsel. If you're leaving because you feel unsafe or the relationship or object is affecting your health or quality of life, it is also important to be safe in leaving. We can consult others concepts of worldly wisdom, whether philosophical, spiritual, or secular in nature. It all comes down to the decision: do we stay or go? We leave that decision to you for you to ponder and consider. So, just on this one point, I know there are a lot of situations where people are literally unsafe in their situation. Glenn, I mean, I could answer for you, but this was obviously something that was important to you. Do you want to fill this out a little bit, what you mean, so that everyone understands what you mean by uh, the physical or emotional ramifications and about a person feeling unsafe, what they should do?
Yeah, I think it's very easy for all of us on some occasion to sit back and just say, oh, why didn't you leave? It's just so as though it's just easy. It's just, but the reality is that it's not just easy necessarily. It can be incredibly difficult, tough, and that's what I was trying to get to. The safety is really important, and only the
Right.
person themselves can know how safe it is. It doesn't need someone sitting on the sidelines saying, "Oh, why don't you just pack up the car and take off, go down the shelter, or to your friends or something?" That's garbage.
Right.
It's just like people throwing out stupid ideas, and I think it's just all the more confusing. Leaving sometimes has to be a constructive, well thought out, well planned decision if you're going to go. Because if you've got no backup, you could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So I just want to say to people, that's what I'm really trying to say is, once again, like Jamie says, it's an individual situation.
Yeah.
And I really can't comment on those situations. And I don't think other than people who are close to it can comment either. You
Right.
cannot generalize about safety,
Right.
and it's incredibly important. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah. So we're thinking about you in that way. If you're in a situation like this, definitely reach out. And, hopefully each one of you listening has people surrounding them that you can talk to and vent to. But yeah, if you're in an unsafe situation, get yourself safe first and then take care of the logistics. And, you don't have to do it alone. There are groups of people. If it's a physical battering situation, there are plenty of groups that are there to help you. Jen and I watched a Netflix show, and it was based on a true story. And this person was in an abusive situation, and she decided to leave. And there's a lot of red tape and things like that. It's a state-run organization, insurance and lots of things to be signed and all that, and weird rules. But she was willing to do it because she needed to get out, and she was in a situation where he controlled everything. So she didn't have a car. She lived out in the middle of nowhere. And there were some really tough obstacles to overcome. And it was hard. It was hard for her, especially as a single mom. But she did what was necessary. And it took a long time for her to get free. And she even went back to the guy. It was so hard. And he acted all nice and stuff. And Jen and I are watching it, and I'm like, no, don't go back. Don't go back. I mean, you could see it clearly that he was just pretending to change. And he seemed really different for about, in movie time, it seemed like about 30 minutes. He seemed a lot better. But you could quickly see him starting to break again and see that he blamed it
Slip.
all on
Yeah.
slip. Yeah. Blamed it on drinking because he had quit drinking. So he blamed everything on the drinking, he himself. And they said, well, I'm not drinking anymore. I'm done. And that was the problem. He didn't look deeper and see that the problem wasn't just the drinking. Drinking may make it worse. But some of us, we just have deeper problems, and we can cover it up with the substance, and we can blame the substance for everything. But the truth is, there's a lot of brokenness in people, and they abuse other people because they hate themselves, and they try to cover it over with things, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work forever. So yeah, so that was good. Thank you, Glenn. Jen, did you want to make a comment about Glenn's suggestion? Um,
I just will agree. I just definitely agree. And I think this is where wise counsel can come in handy because I think there are people who are survivors that have gone through that kind of situation,
Yeah,
that are part of like a support group or an advocate group to where they can get more information on the relationship and the abuse and what has been going on in detail to
right.
kind of assess how dangerous it is and what steps and precautions need to be taken.
Beautiful. That's
So
perfect.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's it. We got done close to the top of the hour, just about 9 minutes after the hour here. We try to keep it to about 2 hours sometimes, and so this ended up being good. Nez thought it was another great conversation, and I would agree with that. I still say that Glenn's write-ups, as far as the actual write-up itself, is much better than any of us do, and it's easier. It's easier for me if all I have to worry about is hosting. So hopefully, Glenn, you take that as a compliment, that your write-ups are far superior to my write-ups. But I'll say this: if Glenn and I were going to write a play, I think I would win in that category. I love writing plays. It's a completely different thing than the write-up. I have a lot of experience with that, and have had some success. But this isn't a battle of who's a better playwright. I'm just saying that I really like Glenn's writing. He puts a lot of time and effort and thought into them. And this write up, although I had it running around in my mind for a week, I really procrastinated and kind of waited to the last minute. So I do admit that. But hopefully you guys got some benefit out of it. And I was hoping that our conversation would benefit someone, and we'll leave that to you to decide whether it did or didn't. Okay, let's say our goodbyes. We'll start with Glenn. Glenn, if you take a minute and say goodbye to the peoples.
Yeah, sure. See you later, everybody. See you later.
I love it.
And it's having different people do the write-ups is good because we need
Yeah.
different angles. And,
Sure.
you know, and we might even have a special next week with what do they call it? What do they call it? Ghost writer? Or guest
Ghost Rider. Yes.
In the sky, that's it.
Ghost
And,
Rider in the sky. Yeah, that's it.
That's it. So we might hopefully have another input next week.
Sweet.
Or maybe see what happens.
Yeah,
And
so
The
very
that,
universe
respective.
may or may not provide. Who can say?
that's right. That may be a surprise for next week if someone
Yeah.
talked about doing a write up for next week. So we'll see how that comes along. So yeah, we'll look forward to that possible surprise for next week. And Jen, take a minute to say goodbye to the peoples.
Good night, people. So good to be here with you guys tonight. Thank you for your input and your opinions and even sharing some of your experiences. I know that's not always easy, but
Yeah,
it's a huge compliment that you guys feel safe enough to share in the comment section, the
yeah.
chat. So I really appreciate that. And believe if you don't mind, I don't know if you posted the name of that documentary about the martial artist guy, but if you have it, just post it in the chat.
Yeah, thank
We'd
you.
love to watch it.
Yeah, post it again. Jen and I love suggestions, and we usually follow those up. So Janet popped in. So Janet, we hope you're doing well. You're in our constant prayers for all the discomfort that you deal with every day, and also your situation, and you're just always on our hearts and our prayers. So thank you for stopping in. Miss you so much. And I don't think I forgot anyone else. Well, I didn't really forget Janet. She just popped in there at the end. Guys, we appreciate everyone that is in the chat. And just like Jen said, we appreciate your comments and things. If you're listening to this and you don't participate in the chat, we appreciate you just as much. It's just that we'd love to have people be part of the conversation. I know not everyone can do that. Some people under a different time zone and things like that. So they listen to the show. In fact, Nathan and Glenn, as far as I understand, are close. They may be close to the same time zone. I'm not sure what the difference is between New Zealand and Australia. But they're on that side of the world. Let's put it that way. So
Oh,
2 hours
they're 2 hours
apart.
apart.
Two
Yeah.
hours apart. Okay. Okay. So as far as listeners, at one point we got up to 12 people. So that's a pretty good, pretty successful people involved in the chat. That usually there are more that are listening, but as far as people actually participating, and pretty consistently about 8 people, and we just really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you do like this sort of content, do leave a like for us. That's how YouTube knows, whether people seem to like the broadcast or not. And sometimes they'll decide to put you at the top of the pile. So when people do a search for things like this, they're able to find it easily without it being buried. We're not monetized. We don't have any commercials or anything like that. So we're also not in it to make money at all. We don't make anything. In fact, that's why we went to StreamYard, because we're not earning anything from the broadcast. We don't expect to. But to pay $15 a piece for each one of us, it's like $45 to do a hour broadcast per month. Couldn't do that. So we're grateful for StreamYard. So thank you for all your support. Also tell people if you like the broadcast, tell your friends. Post from YouTube. You can post the shows on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Just get the word out there. If you want to do that, we would appreciate it. And we'll be back next week. Don't know what the topic will be, but we might have a surprise ghostwriter for next week.
Sweet.
And we're looking forward to that. So until then, we hope everyone has a great week. Be careful out there. Love one another. And until then, good night and God bless.